The morning sun filtered through the large windows of Ashley's hair salon, casting warm golden light across the polished floors. At 48, Ashley Martinez had found peace in the simple rhythm of cutting, styling, and chatting with her clients in the small town of Riverside. Her hands, once steady with medical instruments, now moved gracefully with scissors and brushes. "A little shorter on the sides, please," requested Mrs. Thompson, settling into the comfortable chair. Ashley smiled and began her work, the familiar snip of scissors creating a soothing sound. This was her world now, far from the chaos and heartbreak of her previous life as a war nurse. For 12 years, Ashley had served in conflict zones, treating wounded soldiers and civilians. She had seen things that haunted her dreams and made decisions that weighed heavily on her heart. When she finally returned home, the transition to civilian life had been difficult. The constant noise, the pressure, the life and death situations, it all seemed to follow her everywhere. That's when she discovered hairdressing. There was something therapeutic about the gentle nature of the work, the way she could make people feel beautiful and confident. Her clients became like family, sharing their stories, their worries, and their joys. Ashley found healing in giving others small moments of happiness. "You have such steady hands," Mrs. Thompson commented, watching Ashley work in the mirror. "Have you always been a hairstylist?" Ashley paused for a moment, her reflection caught in the mirror. "No," she said softly. "I used to be a nurse." "A long time ago." "Oh, how wonderful! What made you change careers?" Before Ashley could answer, the ground beneath them began to shake. At first it was just a gentle tremor, like a large truck passing by. But within seconds, the shaking intensified. Picture frames rattled on the walls, bottles of shampoo began falling from shelves, and the large mirror in front of them cracked down the middle. "Earthquake!" Ashley shouted, grabbing Mrs. Thompson and pulling her away from the mirror just as it shattered, sending glass fragments across the floor. They crouched under the sturdy reception desk as the building swayed violently around them. The earthquake lasted only 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the shaking finally stopped, Ashley and Mrs. Thompson emerged from their hiding place to find the salon in ruins. Broken glass covered the floor, furniture had toppled over, and a large crack ran across the ceiling. "Are you hurt?" Ashley asked, quickly examining Mrs. Thompson for injuries. Her nurse training kicked in automatically, checking for cuts, bruises, or signs of trauma. "I think I'm okay," Mrs. Thompson replied, though she was clearly shaken. "Just scared." Ashley helped her to a safe spot away from any hanging fixtures and then moved to the window. What she saw outside made her heart sink. The earthquake had been massive. Buildings throughout downtown Riverside had collapsed or were severely damaged. The old library across the street had partially caved in, and she could see people trapped under the rubble. Without hesitation, Ashley grabbed her first aid kit from behind the reception desk, a habit she'd never lost from her nursing days. She always kept medical supplies nearby, just in case. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to stay here and call for help if you can get a signal on your phone," Ashley said, her voice calm but urgent. "I'm going to help those people outside." "But Ashley, it's dangerous." "What if there are aftershocks?" Ashley looked at her reflection in a broken piece of mirror on the floor. For a moment she saw herself in military fatigues, rushing between hospital tents to save lives. The familiar feeling of purpose washed over her. "I have to help them," she said simply. "It's what I do." Ashley carefully made her way outside, stepping over debris and broken glass. The scene was devastating. The main street of Riverside looked like a war zone. Cars were crushed under fallen building facades, power lines hung dangerously low, and everywhere she looked, people were crying for help. She ran toward the collapsed library first, where she could hear voices calling from beneath the rubble. A small crowd had already gathered, trying to move the heavy concrete blocks with their bare hands. "Stop!" Ashley called out as she approached. "Don't move anything yet." We could make it worse for the people trapped underneath. The townspeople looked at her with confusion. Tom Bradley, who owned the hardware store, frowned. "Ashley, we need to get them out." "I know, but we need to be smart about it," she replied, kneeling down near the rubble to listen carefully. "I used to be a nurse. Let me assess the situation first." Ashley pressed her ear to different sections of the debris, listening for voices and trying to determine where the trapped people were located. She heard at least 3 different voices, 2 adults and what sounded like a child. "Okay, there are at least 3 people in there," she announced to the group. "We need to create a safe path to reach them without causing more collapse." She directed the volunteers to carefully remove smaller pieces of debris while avoiding the larger structural elements that might be supporting the remaining walls. Her medical training had taught her to stay calm under pressure and think systematically about problems. As they worked, Ashley called out to the trapped people, keeping them talking to assess their conditions and keep their spirits up. "What's your name?" she called through a gap in the rubble. "Sarah," came a weak voice. "I'm Sarah Williams, and I'm here with my son Jamie. He's only 8 years old." "Sarah, this is Ashley. I'm here to help you. Are you or Jamie injured?" "I think my leg might be broken, and there's a lot of dust. Jamie seems okay, but he's scared." "That's completely normal, Sarah. Jamie, can you hear me? You're being very brave. We're going to get you and your mom out of there very soon." While directing the rescue effort at the library, Ashley noticed smoke rising from the apartment building next door. She realized that the earthquake had probably damaged gas lines or electrical systems, creating fire hazards throughout the town. "Tom, I need you to keep working here with the others," she told the hardware store owner. "Follow my instructions about which pieces to move. I need to check that apartment building." Ashley ran to the apartment building, where she found elderly Mr. Garcia sitting on the front steps, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "Mr. Garcia, are you all right?" she asked, immediately examining his wound. "I think so," he replied weakly. "But Mrs. Chen is still inside. She lives on the 2nd floor, and I heard her calling for help before the smoke got too thick." Ashley looked up at the building. The 2nd floor windows showed signs of smoke, but the structure seemed mostly intact. She made a quick decision. "Mr. Garcia, I need you to move across the street to safety. Can you walk?" He nodded, and Ashley helped him to his feet before running into the building. The stairway was damaged but still passable. She covered her nose and mouth with her shirt and climbed carefully to the 2nd floor. "Mrs. Chen," she called out. "Where are you?" "Here. In apartment 2B !" came a frightened voice. Ashley found Mrs. Chen trapped in her bathroom, where the doorframe had warped and jammed the door shut. She was an elderly woman who lived alone and had mobility issues even under normal circumstances. "Mrs. Chen, this is Ashley from the hair salon. I'm going to get you out of there." Ashley examined the door and frame. The earthquake had shifted the building slightly, causing the wooden frame to twist. She needed something to pry it open. Looking around the hallway, she found a fire extinguisher and used it as a lever to force the door open. Mrs. Chen was sitting on the floor, frightened but uninjured. "I couldn't get the door open," she said tearfully, "and there's so much smoke." "It's okay now," Ashley said gently, helping her to her feet. "We need to get you outside quickly." She supported Mrs. Chen as they made their way down the damaged staircase and out of the building. The smoke was getting thicker, and Ashley realized that the fire was spreading quickly through the building's old wooden structure. Once Mrs. Chen was safely across the street, Ashley returned to the library rescue. The volunteers had made good progress under her guidance, and they had managed to create a small opening to where Sarah and Jamie were trapped. "Sarah, we can see you now," Ashley called through the gap. "We're going to pass you some water and then work on making this opening bigger."
She sent someone to her salon to retrieve bottles of water from her small refrigerator, and they carefully passed them through to the trapped family. While the others continued working on widening the opening, Ashley assessed Sarah's condition through the gap. "Can you move your fingers and toes?" she asked. "Yes, but my leg really hurts when I try to move it." "Don't try to move it yet. We'll take care of that once we get you out." After another hour of careful work, they had created an opening large enough to extract the trapped people. Ashley climbed partway into the space to help guide Sarah and Jamie out safely. Jamie came out first, a frightened but uninjured 8-year-old boy who immediately hugged his rescuers. Sarah was more difficult to extract due to her injured leg, but Ashley was able to stabilize it with materials from her first aid kit and some wooden boards the volunteers found. "You're going to be fine," Ashley told Sarah as they carefully moved her to safety. "Your leg is definitely broken, but it's a clean break. The paramedics will take good care of you when they arrive." By this time, word had spread throughout the town about Ashley's rescue efforts. Despite having no official authority or equipment, she had become the unofficial coordinator of the emergency response. People began bringing injured neighbors to her makeshift treatment area outside her damaged salon. Ashley worked tirelessly, using her medical knowledge to treat cuts, set broken bones, and comfort the frightened. She converted her salon into a temporary medical station, using clean towels as bandages, hair salon chairs as examination tables, and even hair dryers to provide warmth for people in shock. "Where did you learn to do all this?" asked Jennifer Walsh, a young mother whose arm Ashley had just splinted. "I was a nurse in the military," Ashley explained while wrapping the splint securely. "I served in several conflict zones, treating wounded soldiers and civilians." "Why did you become a hairstylist then?" Ashley paused in her work, considering the question. "I needed peace," she said finally. "After years of seeing so much trauma and pain, I wanted to do something that brought people joy instead of just treating their suffering." "But you came right back to helping people in crisis," Jennifer observed. Ashley looked around at the organized chaos of her makeshift medical station. Despite the destruction around them, there was something familiar and right about what she was doing. "I guess you can't really escape who you are," she said with a small smile. As the afternoon wore on, more challenges emerged. The elementary school at the edge of town had suffered significant damage, and several teachers and students were trapped in the cafeteria when part of the roof collapsed. Ashley organized a second rescue team while continuing to oversee medical care at her salon. "I need experienced people for this one," she told the growing crowd of volunteers. "The school building is less stable than the library was." Tom Bradley stepped forward, along with several other local business owners who had construction experience. Ashley briefed them on safety procedures she had learned during her military service, how to assess structural integrity, how to work systematically to avoid causing further collapse, and how to communicate effectively in high-stress situations. "Remember," she told them as they prepared to leave for the school, "slow and steady saves lives. Don't take unnecessary risks. We want to bring everyone home safely." While the rescue team worked at the school, Ashley continued treating injured people at her makeshift medical station. She was reminded of the field hospitals she had worked in during her military service, but this felt different somehow. These weren't soldiers in a foreign conflict. These were her neighbors, people she knew personally, members of her adopted community. Dr. Patricia Moore, who ran the town's small medical clinic, arrived at Ashley's salon around mid-afternoon. Her own clinic had been badly damaged in the earthquake, and she was amazed to find Ashley running such an efficient operation. "This is incredible, Doctor," Moore said, surveying the organized treatment area. "You've created a fully functional emergency medical station using beauty salon equipment." "We work with what we have," Ashley replied, finishing up a bandage on a teenager's scraped knee. "How many casualties have you seen?" "About 30 so far, mostly minor injuries. But I'm worried about the people who might be trapped in buildings we haven't checked yet." Ashley nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. Riverside was a small town, but it was spread out over several square miles. There could be isolated houses or small businesses where people were trapped and no one had thought to look for them. "We need to organize search teams," Ashley said. "People who know the area well and can check on residents who might be alone or vulnerable." Dr. Moore agreed, and they began coordinating with the volunteers who weren't involved in the library and school rescues. Ashley drew on her military experience to create systematic search patterns that would cover the entire town efficiently. "Each team should have at least one person with basic first aid training," she instructed. "If you find someone who's seriously injured, don't try to move them. Mark the location and send someone back here for help." As the search teams spread out across Riverside, Ashley received word that the rescue at the school had been successful. All 7 trapped teachers and students had been extracted safely, though 2 had minor injuries. The team at the library had also made progress, finding a 3rd person trapped in a different section of the building. By evening, Ashley's makeshift medical station had treated over 50 people. Most injuries were minor, cuts, bruises, and sprains, but she had also dealt with several serious cases that required all of her medical knowledge and experience. One of the most challenging cases was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman with diabetes who had been without her medication since the earthquake hit. Ashley recognized the signs of diabetic ketoacidosis and knew it could be life-threatening if not treated quickly. "Dr. Moore, I need you to look at Mrs. Patterson," Ashley called urgently. "Her blood sugar levels are dangerously high." Working together, they were able to stabilize Mrs. Patterson using insulin from Dr. Moore's emergency kit and IV fluids that Ashley had improvised from materials found around the salon. It was delicate work that required both Ashley's nursing expertise and Dr. Moore's medical knowledge. "Where did you serve?" Dr. Moore asked as they worked on Mrs. Patterson's 4th line. "Afghanistan and Iraq, mostly," Ashley replied, monitoring the patient's vital signs. 3 tours total, working in field hospitals and forward operating bases. "What made you leave medicine?" Ashley was quiet for a moment as she adjusted the IV drip rate. "PTSD," she said simply. "I burned out completely. Couldn't handle any more trauma, couldn't make any more life and death decisions. I thought I was done with all of this. And now I'm remembering why I became a nurse in the first place." As night fell, professional emergency responders began arriving from neighboring cities. Fire trucks, ambulances, and search and rescue teams filled the streets of Riverside. But they quickly realized that Ashley had already organized much of the initial response. Captain Rodriguez of the Regional Search and Rescue Team approached Ashley as she was changing the bandages on a construction worker's deep laceration. "Are you the person I've been hearing about? The one who's been coordinating things here?" Ashley looked up, her hands still busy with the bandage. "I'm just helping where I can. I understand you're a former military nurse?" "Yes, sir. 12 years of service, including 3 overseas deployments." Captain Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Your initial response here probably saved several lives. The way you organized the library rescue and coordinated medical care prevented what could have been a much worse tragedy." Ashley finished securing the bandage and turned her full attention to the captain. "What do you need from me now?" "We'd like you to continue coordinating civilian medical response while our teams handle the search and rescue operations. You clearly know what you're doing, and the townspeople trust you." The partnership between Ashley's volunteer operation and the professional emergency teams worked well. Ashley's local knowledge and established relationships with the townspeople complemented the specialized equipment and training of the official responders. Over the next 3 days, Ashley worked alongside the professional emergency teams, providing medical care and emotional support to earthquake victims. Her salon became the unofficial community center, where people gathered for updates, shared resources, and found comfort in each other's company. She treated everything from minor cuts and bruises to serious fractures and shock. Her steady hands, which had once wielded surgical instruments in field hospitals and now usually held hair scissors, proved just as capable with emergency medical procedures. On the second day after the earthquake, Ashley faced one of her most difficult challenges. A gas leak at the town's senior center had caused an explosion, injuring several elderly residents and trapping others in the building. The professional rescue teams were dealing with another emergency across town, so Ashley found herself leading the initial response. "I need volunteers who aren't afraid of fire," she announced to the crowd gathered at her salon. "But only people who can follow instructions exactly. This is going to be dangerous." Several townspeople stepped forward, including Tom Bradley, whose hardware store experience had made him valuable in the previous rescues. Ashley briefed them on the situation and the safety procedures they would need to follow. "Gas leaks and fires are different from structural collapses," she explained. "We have to move faster, but we also have to be even more careful. One spark in the wrong place could cause another explosion." Ashley led the team to the senior center, where they found a chaotic scene. The explosion had blown out several windows and started a small fire in the kitchen area. Smoke was visible from the upper floors, and Ashley could hear people calling for help from inside the building. She quickly assessed the situation, drawing on her experience from military operations in damaged buildings. The structure appeared stable, but the fire was spreading and the smoke was getting thicker. "Tom, take 3 people and work on evacuating the ground floor," she ordered. "Stay low, watch for falling debris, and get everyone out through the main entrance. I'm going upstairs to check for people who can't get out on their own." Ashley entered the building, moving carefully through the smoke-filled hallways. Her years of military service had taught her how to operate in dangerous environments, and she drew on that training now as she searched for trapped residents. She found 3 elderly residents on the second floor, including Mr. Henderson, who was bedridden and couldn't evacuate without assistance. Working with another volunteer, Ashley carefully carried Mr. Henderson down the damaged stairway to safety. By the time the professional firefighters arrived, Ashley and her team had successfully evacuated all the residents from the senior center. 2 people had suffered smoke inhalation and minor burns, but there were no serious casualties. "You did good work here," the fire chief told Ashley as they watched his crew extinguish the remaining flames. "Your quick response prevented this from becoming a much worse situation." As the days passed, Ashley found herself taking on more responsibilities in the town's recovery effort. She organized volunteer schedules, coordinated supply distributions, and continued to provide medical care for earthquake victims. Her leadership during the crisis had earned her the respect and trust of both the townspeople and the professional emergency responders. But the constant activity was also taking its toll. Ashley was working 18-hour days, sleeping only a few hours each night on a cot in her salon. She was running on adrenaline and determination, but she could feel the familiar signs of burnout beginning to creep in. On the 3rd night after the earthquake, Dr. Moore found Ashley sitting outside her salon, staring up at the stars. "You should be sleeping," Dr. Moore said, settling down beside her. "Couldn't sleep," Ashley replied. "Too much on my mind." "This reminds you of your military service, doesn't it?" Ashley nodded. The constant pressure, the never-ending stream of people who need help, the feeling that if I stop for even a moment, someone might die. "Is that why you left medicine?" "The pressure?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment. "I left because I couldn't handle failing," she said finally. "In the military, you learn to compartmentalize, to push through the trauma and keep working. But eventually, all that suppressed emotion has to go somewhere. And where did it go? into panic attacks, insomnia, depression. I started making mistakes, second-guessing every decision. I was afraid I was going to get someone killed because I couldn't think clearly anymore. Dr. Moore nodded understandingly. But you seem to be handling this crisis well. This is different, Ashley said. These are my neighbors, my community. And I have control over the situation in a way I never did in the military. I can set the pace, make decisions based on what feels right, rather than what some commanding officer orders me to do. Maybe you've learned how to take care of yourself while taking care of others. Ashley considered this. It was true that she felt more balanced now than she had during her military service. She was still working long hours and dealing with traumatic situations, but she wasn't experiencing the same overwhelming anxiety and sense of powerlessness that had eventually driven her away from medicine. I think I've learned that healing others and healing yourself don't have to be separate things, Ashley said. In the military, we were taught to ignore our own needs, to push through anything for the mission. But this feels different. Helping my neighbors is helping me remember who I am and what I'm capable of. The next morning brought new challenges. Heavy rains had started during the night, and the damaged buildings and infrastructure of Riverside were struggling to handle the additional stress. Several areas of town were flooding, and there were concerns about contaminated water and potential disease outbreaks. Ashley found herself coordinating with public health officials to set up water purification stations and monitor the health of earthquake survivors. Her military experience with field sanitation and disease prevention proved valuable as the town dealt with the new complications. We need to be especially careful with the elderly and children, she explained to a group of volunteers as they organized the distribution of clean water and food. Their immune systems are more vulnerable to the bacteria and contaminants that might be in the floodwater. The health monitoring revealed several cases of minor infections and gastrointestinal illness, but Ashley's preventive measures helped contain what could have been a serious public health crisis. Her ability to think systematically about complex problems, developed during her military service, was proving invaluable in managing the multifaceted challenges of the town's recovery. As the immediate crisis began to stabilize, Ashley started thinking about longer-term recovery efforts. Many people had lost their homes and businesses, and the town would need months or even years to fully rebuild. She began working with local officials and volunteer organizations to develop comprehensive recovery plans. We can't just focus on rebuilding the physical infrastructure, she told Mayor Williams during one of their planning meetings. We also need to address the emotional and psychological impact of what people have been through. Ashley proposed establishing support groups for earthquake survivors, training programs for disaster preparedness, and community events to help maintain the strong bonds that had formed during the crisis. Her understanding of trauma and recovery, gained through her own struggles with PTSD, gave her insights that the other planners lacked. 1 week after the earthquake, Ashley finally allowed herself a full night's sleep. She had trained several other volunteers to handle routine medical care, and the professional emergency teams had taken over most of the search and rescue operations. For the first time since the disaster began, she felt comfortable stepping back from her round-the-clock leadership role. When she woke up the next morning, Ashley found a crowd gathered outside her damaged salon. At first, she worried that there had been another emergency, but as she got closer, she realized that the townspeople had come to thank her. "We wanted to do something to show our appreciation," said Mayor Williams, stepping forward to speak for the group. "Your leadership during the earthquake saved lives and held our community together during our darkest hour." The crowd had brought flowers, homemade food, and cards written by children who had been helped during the crisis. Ashley was overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude and affection. "I just did what anyone would have done," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "No," said Sarah Williams, leaning on crutches as she recovered from her leg injury. "What you did was extraordinary. You gave us hope when everything seemed hopeless, and you showed us that we were stronger together than we ever imagined we could be." Jamie, Sarah's 8-year-old son, stepped forward and handed Ashley a drawing he had made. It showed her cutting someone's hair while wearing a superhero cape. "You're my hero," Jamie said simply. Ashley knelt down to Jamie's level, studying his drawing carefully. "You know what makes someone a hero, Jamie? Being brave?" "Being brave is part of it," Ashley said. "But the most important part is caring about other people enough to help them, even when it's hard or scary." "Like you did for me and Mom?" "Yes, but also like when you help your mom with chores, or when you're kind to a classmate who's having a bad day." Heroes come in all sizes, and you don't have to wait until you're grown up to be one. The community gathering became an impromptu celebration of resilience and recovery. People shared stories of how they had helped each other during the crisis, recognized the contributions of various volunteers, and began making plans for rebuilding their town. Ashley found herself at the center of these conversations, but not as the sole leader she had been during the emergency. Instead, she was one voice among many, contributing her expertise and experience to collective decision-making processes. "What are your plans now?" asked Doctor Moore as they watched children playing games organized by some of the volunteers. "I'm not sure," Ashley admitted. "My salon will need major repairs before it can reopen, and I've been thinking about whether I want to go back to just cutting hair or if I should consider other options." "Such as?" "Maybe combining both of my careers somehow. I've realized that I don't have to choose between helping people in crisis and helping them in everyday life. Maybe there's a way to do both." Over the following weeks, as the immediate emergency response phase ended and the long-term recovery began, Ashley started developing her ideas for how she might reshape her career. She had rediscovered her passion for medical care, but she had also learned to value the quieter, more personal connections she made through her salon work. The solution she eventually developed was innovative and perfectly suited to both her skills and her community's needs. When her salon reopened 6 months later, half of the space was dedicated to traditional beauty services, and the other half had been converted into a community wellness center. "It's perfect," said Sarah Williams, who had become one of Ashley's regular clients during her recovery from the leg injury. "I can get my hair done and have my blood pressure checked at the same time." The wellness center offered basic health screenings, first aid training, and support groups for people dealing with trauma recovery. Ashley had obtained certification as a community health worker, allowing her to provide basic medical services while maintaining her hairstyling license. "I finally figured out that I don't have to choose between caring for people's bodies and caring for their spirits," Ashley explained to a reporter who was writing an article about the town's recovery. "Beauty and health are both important parts of helping people feel good about themselves." The story of Ashley's heroism during the earthquake had spread beyond Riverside, attracting attention from disaster response organizations and medical groups. She received several job offers, including positions with federal emergency management agencies and international humanitarian organizations. But Ashley chose to stay in Riverside, continuing to serve her community in her unique dual role as beautician and healthcare provider. She also began traveling occasionally to other communities to teach disaster preparedness and emergency response, sharing the lessons she had learned during the earthquake. "Why did you decide to stay?" asked Captain Rodriguez during one of his visits to check on the town's recovery progress. "Because this is where I belong," Ashley replied simply. "I spent years running away from who I was and what I was capable of. The earthquake taught me that you can't really escape yourself, but you also don't have to be trapped by your past." Ashley's story became a model for other communities preparing for natural disasters. Her combination of professional medical training and personal connection to the communities she served proved to be incredibly effective in both crisis response and long-term recovery. A year after the earthquake, Riverside held a memorial service for the victims and a celebration of the community's resilience. Ashley was asked to speak at the ceremony, representing the many volunteers who had contributed to the town's recovery. A year ago, this town faced its darkest hour, she began, looking out at the crowd of people she had helped heal, both physically and emotionally. Buildings fell, people were hurt, and we all felt afraid and alone. But in that darkness, something beautiful happened. We discovered that we were stronger together than any of us were alone. She paused, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the idealistic young woman who had enlisted as a military nurse to the burned-out veteran who had fled to the safety of small-town life, to the person she was now, someone who had learned to balance service with self-care, action with reflection, and heroism with humanity. That morning, when the ground started shaking, I thought my past was behind me. I thought I had left the person who saves people behind and become someone different. But what I learned is that you can't really leave yourself behind. The things that matter to you, the ways you want to help, they don't disappear just because you change jobs or move to a new place. Ashley's voice grew stronger as she continued. Every one of us has something we can offer when crisis hits. Maybe it's medical training, maybe it's construction skills, maybe it's just the ability to stay calm and think clearly. But we all have something, and we all have a responsibility to use it when our neighbors need help. She looked directly at Jamie, Sarah's son, who was now 9 years old and sitting in the front row with his mother. The heroes aren't the people with special powers or perfect lives. Heroes are just ordinary people who choose to help when helping is hard. After the ceremony, Ashley returned to her salon wellness center, where several clients were waiting for appointments. As she put on her apron and picked up her scissors, she felt a deep sense of contentment. She had found her place, not as a war nurse or a simple hairstylist, but as someone who could heal both bodies and spirits in her own community. The earthquake had destroyed much of Riverside, but it had also revealed the strength and compassion that existed within its people. And for Ashley, it had provided the chance to reclaim the best parts of herself: the healer, the leader, the person who shows up when others need help. 2 years after the earthquake, Ashley received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Patricia Stevens, her former commanding officer from her last deployment, had driven to Riverside to see her. "I heard about what you did during the earthquake," Colonel Stevens said as Ashley served her coffee in the wellness center. "I have to admit, I was surprised when you left the military so abruptly. Your performance reviews were excellent, and you had real leadership potential." Ashley set down her coffee cup carefully. "I was burned out, Colonel. I couldn't handle another deployment, another field hospital, another convoy of wounded soldiers." "I understand that now," Colonel Stevens replied. "But what you've built here, this combination of medical care and community service, it's exactly the kind of innovation the military needs. We're developing new programs for veteran transition and community resilience. Would you consider consulting with us?" Ashley considered the offer. Working with the military again, even as a consultant, would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. But now, with her new understanding of how to balance service with self-care, it seemed like an opportunity to help other veterans find their own paths to meaningful post-military careers. "I'd be interested in hearing more," she said, "but I won't leave Riverside, and I won't commit to anything that interferes with my work here." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say," Colonel Stevens smiled. The communities that recover best from disasters are the ones with strong local leadership and established support networks. What you've built here is a model for resilient communities everywhere. Over the next few months, Ashley began working part-time as a consultant, helping the military develop programs to better utilize the skills and experience of veterans in civilian emergency response roles. Her unique perspective, as someone who had served in combat zones and also led civilian disaster response efforts, proved invaluable in bridging the gap between military and civilian approaches to crisis management. The consulting work also brought Ashley into contact with other veterans who were struggling with similar transitions from military to civilian life. She began organizing support groups and mentoring programs, helping other former service members find meaningful ways to use their skills in their new communities. The key is understanding that your military experience isn't something you have to leave behind, she told a group of recently discharged veterans during one of her workshops. It's something you can adapt and apply in new ways that serve your community and give your life meaning. One of the veterans in her program was Maria Santos, a former Army medic who had been struggling with PTSD and unemployment since leaving the service 2 years earlier. "I feel like I don't fit anywhere," Maria confided to Ashley after one of the group sessions. "I know how to treat combat injuries and work under extreme pressure, but I don't know how to do anything that matters in the civilian world." Ashley understood Maria's frustration completely. Have you considered emergency medical services, paramedic work, disaster response, community health programs? "I looked into it, but the certification requirements seem overwhelming. And I'm not sure I can handle the stress of medical emergencies again." "What if you started smaller?" Ashley suggested. "I needed time to rebuild my confidence and learn how to manage my stress responses. Maybe you could volunteer with local emergency response teams, take some community college courses in healthcare, and see how it feels." Ashley helped Maria develop a gradual re-entry plan into medical work, starting with volunteer opportunities and part-time training programs. Within a year, Maria had become a certified emergency medical technician and was working with the county ambulance service. "You saved my life," Maria told Ashley at her EMT graduation ceremony. "Not in the dramatic way you saved people during the earthquake, but by helping me find a way to use my skills and experience in a way that felt manageable and meaningful." Stories like Maria's became common as Ashley's veteran support programs expanded. She had created a model for helping former military personnel transition their skills to civilian emergency response roles, and the program was being replicated in communities across the country. 3 years after the earthquake, Ashley's life had found a rhythm that felt sustainable and fulfilling. Her salon wellness center was thriving, serving as both a business and a community hub. Her consulting work with veterans and disaster preparedness organizations was growing, but she had learned to set boundaries that protected her time and energy. Most importantly, she had found a way to serve others that didn't require sacrificing her own well-being. The lessons she had learned about self-care and work-life balance were as important as her medical and leadership skills in making her effective as a helper and healer. One evening, as Ashley was closing up the wellness center, she received a phone call from Jamie Williams, now 11 years old. "Hi, Ashley," he said. "I wanted to ask you something. Remember when you told me that heroes come in all sizes?" "Of course I remember," Ashley replied, smiling at the memory. "Well, there's this new kid at school named David. He just moved here from another state, and some of the other kids are being mean to him because he's different. He has trouble talking sometimes, and he gets really nervous around people." Ashley listened carefully, recognizing the serious tone in Jamie's voice despite his young age. "I've been trying to be his friend, but I don't know how to help him when the other kids are bullying him. What would a hero do?" Ashley felt a surge of pride in Jamie's compassion and moral courage. What do you think a hero would do? Jamie was quiet for a moment, thinking. I think a hero would stand up for David, even if it meant the bullies might pick on me too. That sounds like exactly what a hero would do, Ashley agreed. But remember, being a hero also means being smart about how you help. Have you talked to a teacher or your parents about what's happening? Not yet. I wasn't sure if that would make things worse for David. Ashley appreciated Jamie's thoughtfulness. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask adults for help when a situation is too big to handle alone. Why don't you talk to your mom about it? And maybe she can help you figure out the best way to support David. Okay, I will. Thanks, Ashley. You always know what to say. After hanging up the phone, Ashley reflected on how much Jamie had grown since the earthquake. The frightened 8-year-old who had been trapped under the library rubble had become a thoughtful, compassionate young person who was already showing leadership qualities. The next day, Sarah Williams stopped by the salon with an update on Jamie's situation. He told me about your conversation last night, Sarah said as Ashley trimmed her hair. We talked to his teacher, and it turns out David has autism spectrum disorder. The teacher has been working on addressing the bullying, but she was grateful to know that Jamie wanted to help. What's the plan? Jamie is going to be David's official buddy for group activities and lunchtime. The teacher thinks having a friend who genuinely cares about him will help David feel more comfortable at school and give him someone to turn to when he's having difficulties. Ashley smiled as she worked. Jamie is turning into quite a young man. He learned from watching you, Sarah said. The way you helped people during the earthquake, the way you've continued to care for this community, it's had a real impact on how he thinks about his responsibilities to others. The influence Ashley had on the young people in Riverside became more apparent as time went on. Several teenagers had started volunteering at the wellness center, learning basic first aid and helping with community health programs. They spoke with enthusiasm about their plans to pursue careers in medicine, emergency services, and community work. You've inspired a whole generation of helpers, Doctor. Moore observed during one of their monthly planning meetings. These kids see service to others as a natural part of life because of the example you've set. Ashley was both humbled and pleased by this observation. She remembered how important adult role models had been in her own decision to become a nurse originally. If her example was helping young people discover their own capacity for service and leadership, that felt like one of the most meaningful outcomes of her post-earthquake journey. As the 4th anniversary of the earthquake approached, Ashley was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell the story of Riverside's recovery. The filmmaker, Michael Torres, had heard about the community's remarkable resilience and Ashley's role in both the immediate response and the long-term rebuilding effort. What interests me most is how disaster can bring out both the worst and the best in people, Torres explained during their first meeting. Riverside seems to be a story about how crisis can transform a community for the better. Ashley was initially reluctant to be the focus of media attention, but she agreed to participate because she thought the story might inspire other communities to think differently about disaster preparedness and recovery. I want to make sure the documentary shows that heroism isn't about one person doing extraordinary things, she told Torres. It's about ordinary people choosing to help each other, and about communities coming together to take care of everyone. The filming process took several months and gave Ashley an opportunity to reflect on how much her life and her community had changed since the earthquake. Torres interviewed many of the people Ashley had helped during the disaster, as well as the professional emergency responders who had worked with her. Ashley probably saved my life, said Mrs. Patterson, the diabetic woman Ashley had treated during the crisis. But more than that, she helped me understand that I didn't have to be helpless just because I was old and sick. She taught me that I could still contribute to my community. Mrs. Patterson had become one of Ashley's most dedicated volunteers at the Wellness Center, helping with health screenings and providing peer support for other elderly residents with chronic health conditions. Captain Rodriguez, now retired from active emergency response but working as a trainer for disaster preparedness programs, also contributed to the documentary. What made Ashley so effective wasn't just her medical training or her military experience, he said. It was her ability to see the whole situation, the immediate medical needs, the structural safety issues, the emotional and psychological impact on the community. She understood that effective disaster response has to address all of these elements simultaneously. The documentary, titled After the Shaking Stops, premiered at several film festivals and was eventually picked up by a major streaming service. Ashley attended the premiere in Riverside, where it was shown at the newly rebuilt community center. Watching her story on screen was both emotional and surreal for Ashley. The film captured not just the dramatic events of the earthquake response, but also the quieter, longer-term work of community healing and resilience building that had followed. "It's strange seeing yourself portrayed as a hero," she confided to Doctor. More after the screening. "I still just feel like someone who did what needed to be done." "Maybe that's exactly what heroism is, Doctor," Moore replied. "Not thinking of yourself as special, but being willing to do what needs to be done regardless of the personal cost." The documentary's success led to more opportunities for Ashley to share her story and expertise. She was invited to speak at conferences on disaster preparedness, veteran transition, and community resilience. Universities asked her to guest lecture in their nursing and public health programs. But Ashley was careful to balance these new opportunities with her primary commitment to her community in Riverside. She accepted speaking engagements and consulting projects only when they aligned with her values and didn't interfere with her work at the Salon Wellness Center. "I learned the hard way that you can't help others effectively if you don't take care of yourself," she told a group of nursing students during one of her guest lectures. Sustainable service requires setting boundaries and maintaining your own physical and emotional health. 5 years after the earthquake, Ashley faced a new challenge that tested all the lessons she had learned about balancing service with self-care. Her mother, who lived in another state, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and needed increasing levels of care and support. "I don't know what to do," Ashley confided to Sarah Williams, who had become one of her closest friends. "My mom needs me, but I also have responsibilities here. And I'm not sure I can handle being a caregiver for someone with dementia while also maintaining everything else I'm doing." Sarah listened sympathetically, remembering her own struggles with caring for aging parents while raising Jamie. "What would you tell someone else in this situation?" Sarah asked. Ashley considered the question. "I'd probably tell them to look at all their options, ask for help from family and friends, and remember that they can't do everything for everyone." "Good advice. Are you willing to take it?" Ashley laughed, recognizing the pattern of giving advice she struggled to follow herself. "I'm learning. It's still hard for me to admit that I have limitations, even after everything I've been through." After much consideration and discussion with family members, Ashley developed a plan that allowed her to support her mother while maintaining her commitments in Riverside. She arranged for professional caregivers to provide daily assistance for her mother, and she traveled to visit regularly while coordinating care from a distance. The experience of managing her mother's care while continuing her work taught Ashley new lessons about the complexity of caregiving and the importance of support systems. She began incorporating these insights into her work at the Wellness Center, developing programs for family caregivers and people dealing with aging parents. "Caring for someone with dementia is like being an emergency responder, but the emergency never ends," she explained to a support group she had started for local caregivers. "You need the same skills, staying calm under pressure, thinking systematically about problems, taking care of your own needs, so you can help others. But you need to sustain them over months or years instead of days or weeks. The Caregivers Support Group became one of the most popular programs at Ashley's Wellness Center. Many participants were dealing with similar challenges of caring for family members while maintaining their own lives and responsibilities. Ashley's combination of practical knowledge and personal experience made her an effective facilitator and mentor. As Ashley approached her 50th birthday, she found herself reflecting on the unexpected path her life had taken. The quiet retirement from medicine that she had planned when she became a hairstylist had been completely derailed by the earthquake, but the new direction felt more authentic and fulfilling than anything she could have planned. "Do you ever regret leaving the military?" asked Maria Santos, the veteran Ashley had mentored, who was now working as a paramedic and studying to become a nurse. "I used to," Ashley replied honestly. "For a long time, I felt like I had failed by not being able to handle the stress and trauma. But now I think leaving was the right decision for me at that time. I needed to step back, heal, and figure out how to serve others in a way that was sustainable for me personally." And the earthquake changed everything? The earthquake showed me that I could use my skills and experience in new ways. I didn't have to choose between taking care of myself and helping others. I could find ways to do both. Maria nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I'm learning in your program. Military service doesn't have to be the end of my story. It can be the beginning of a different kind of service." Ashley's 50th birthday celebration became a community event, organized by the many people whose lives she had touched over the years. The party was held at the community center and included not just residents of Riverside, but also veterans from her mentorship programs, emergency responders she had worked with, and healthcare professionals from the region. "5 years ago, Ashley saved my life when the library collapsed," said Jamie Williams, now 13 and serving as one of the event's organizers. "But she's been saving lives every day since then. Not just with medical care, but by showing all of us what it means to be part of a caring community." The celebration featured displays about the various programs Ashley had developed, testimonials from people she had helped, and presentations about the ongoing recovery and resilience efforts in Riverside. But the centerpiece was a quilt made by community members, with each square representing a different aspect of Ashley's service to the town. "We wanted to create something that showed how your different roles and contributions all fit together," explained Mrs. Thompson, who had coordinated the quilt project. "Nurse, hairstylist, disaster responder, community leader, mentor, friend, they're all part of who you are." Ashley was deeply moved by the tribute and by the community's recognition of her work. But what meant the most to her was seeing how the values of service and mutual support had become embedded in the culture of Riverside itself. The earthquake had been a tragedy that caused significant damage and trauma, but it had also catalyzed the development of a more resilient, connected, and caring community. Ashley's leadership during the crisis had been important, but the long-term changes had required the participation and commitment of many people working together. As she looked ahead to the next phase of her life, Ashley felt optimistic about both her personal future and her community's continued growth. The Wellness Center was expanding to include mental health services and support groups for various populations. Her veteran mentorship programs were being replicated in other regions, and new leaders were emerging from among the young people who had been inspired by her example. "What's next for you?" asked Torres, the documentary filmmaker who had returned to Riverside to film updates for a follow-up project. "More of the same, I hope," Ashley replied. "Continuing to serve my community in whatever ways are most needed, helping veterans find their place in civilian life, and trying to be a good example for young people who are discovering their own capacity for leadership and service." She paused, looking around at the bustling activity of the Wellness Center, where volunteers and staff were providing various services to community members of all ages. I've learned that heroism isn't about dramatic moments of rescue, though those can be important when they're needed. Real heroism is about showing up consistently for your community, day after day, and being willing to adapt and grow as circumstances change. Ashley's story had become one of transformation, not just her own personal journey from burned-out veteran to community leader, but also the transformation of Riverside from a collection of individuals into a genuinely connected and mutually supportive community. The earthquake had shaken loose not just buildings and infrastructure, but also assumptions about what was possible when people worked together. In the rubble of that disaster, Ashley and her neighbors had discovered something valuable: the power of ordinary people to care for each other and create positive change in their community. As she continued her work in the months and years that followed, Ashley remained committed to the lessons she had learned during those crucial days after the earthquake. She maintained her focus on sustainable service, balanced her various responsibilities, and continued to inspire others through her example of thoughtful, compassionate leadership. The hero's journey, she had learned, doesn't end with a single dramatic act of bravery. It continues every day, in every choice to help rather than ignore, to engage rather than withdraw, to use your abilities in service of something larger than yourself. And in that ongoing choice, Ashley had found not just her calling, but her home. 6 years after the earthquake, Ashley faced an unexpected challenge that would test everything she had learned about leadership, community building, and crisis management. A severe winter storm, unprecedented in the region's recorded history, struck Riverside with devastating force. The storm brought with it 3 feet of snow, freezing temperatures that lasted for weeks, and power outages that affected most of the town. Unlike the earthquake, which had been sudden and intense but brief, this crisis unfolded slowly and required sustained response efforts over many weeks. "This is different from the earthquake," Ashley told Dr. Moore as they surveyed the snow-covered town from the Wellness Center, which had become the unofficial emergency coordination center once again. "We're looking at weeks or maybe months of difficult conditions, not just a few days of intense rescue operations." The storm had exposed vulnerabilities in the town's infrastructure that the earthquake rebuilding hadn't addressed. The electrical grid, while repaired after the earthquake, wasn't designed to handle the extreme cold and heavy snow loads. The town's emergency shelter capacity was adequate for short-term disasters, but insufficient for extended displacement of residents whose homes couldn't be heated. Ashley found herself coordinating with town officials to establish warming centers, organize food distribution networks, and ensure that vulnerable residents, particularly the elderly and those with chronic health conditions, received adequate care during the extended crisis. "We need to think about this systematically," she explained to a group of volunteers gathered at the Wellness Center. "Unlike the earthquake, where we were dealing with immediate life-threatening injuries, this crisis is more about preventing problems from developing over time." Her experience with military logistics and long-term field operations proved invaluable in planning for the extended emergency. She helped organize supply chains for heating fuel, established communication networks to maintain contact with isolated residents, and created schedules that would allow volunteer workers to sustain their efforts over weeks rather than days. One of the most challenging aspects of the winter crisis was maintaining morale and mental health during the prolonged difficulties. The excitement and adrenaline that had sustained people during the earthquake response wasn't present during the slow, grinding work of surviving a harsh winter without adequate heating and power. "People are getting discouraged," observed Tom Bradley during one of the daily coordination meetings. "The earthquake was terrible, but at least we could see progress every day as we pulled people out of buildings and cleaned up debris." This just feels endless. Ashley understood the psychological challenges of long-term crisis management from her military experience. She had seen how extended deployments could wear down even the most motivated soldiers, and she recognized similar patterns developing in Riverside. "We need to celebrate small victories and maintain hope," she told the group. "In the military, we learned that morale is just as important as logistics in determining the success of long-term operations." She instituted daily briefings where volunteers could share successes and challenges, weekly community dinners at the warming centers to maintain social connections, and regular recognition ceremonies to acknowledge the contributions of people who were working tirelessly to help their neighbors. Ashley also drew on her experience with trauma and mental health to provide counseling and support for residents who were struggling with the stress of the extended emergency. The isolation, discomfort, and uncertainty were triggering anxiety and depression in many people, particularly those who were already vulnerable. "This reminds me too much of being trapped under the library," confided Sarah Williams during one of their counseling sessions. Sarah had been doing well in the years since the earthquake, but the winter crisis was bringing back some of her trauma responses. "That's completely normal," Ashley assured her. "Our brains are designed to recognize patterns and respond to them, even when the current situation is different from past traumas. The important thing is to acknowledge these feelings and use the coping strategies you've learned." Ashley helped Sarah and other earthquake survivors develop strategies for managing their responses to the winter crisis. She organized support groups specifically for people who were experiencing trauma reactions, and she worked with Dr. Moore to ensure that anyone who needed professional mental health services could access them. The winter crisis also provided opportunities for the community to demonstrate the resilience and mutual support networks that had been strengthened since the earthquake. Neighbors who had gotten to know each other during the earthquake recovery were quick to check on each other during the storm. Young people who had been inspired by Ashley's example took leadership roles in organizing volunteer efforts. Jamie Williams, now 14, proved to be particularly effective at coordinating social media communications and organizing his peer group to help with snow removal and supply distribution. His friend David, the autistic boy he had befriended at school, turned out to have remarkable organizational skills that were valuable in managing inventory and logistics at the warming centers. "It's amazing how crisis brings out hidden talents," Ashley observed to Dr. Moore as they watched the two teenagers efficiently coordinating a group of volunteers. "Jamie's compassion and David's systematic thinking make them a great team." The partnership between Jamie and David had become one of Ashley's favorite examples of how diversity strengthens communities. David's autism, which had initially made him a target for bullying, gave him cognitive strengths that were especially valuable in organizing complex operations. Jamie's social skills and natural leadership complemented David's analytical abilities perfectly. As the winter crisis stretched into its second month, Ashley began to worry about volunteer burnout and resource depletion. The town's financial resources were being strained by the extended emergency response, and some of the most dedicated volunteers were showing signs of exhaustion and stress. "We need help from outside the community," she told Mayor Williams during one of their planning meetings. "We've been managing with local resources for 6 weeks, but we can't sustain this indefinitely." Ashley reached out to her contacts in state and federal emergency management agencies, drawing on the relationships she had built through her disaster preparedness consulting work. She also contacted veteran organizations and medical professional networks, seeking both financial support and volunteer personnel to relieve some of the local workers. The response was overwhelming. Communities that had heard Ashley's story through the documentary or her speaking engagements sent supplies, money, and volunteer workers. Veteran groups organized convoys of supplies and experienced emergency responders. Medical organizations sent healthcare workers to provide relief for Dr. Moore, and the local medical volunteers. This is what resilience looks like, Ashley reflected as she watched volunteer workers from 3 different states coordinating relief efforts with local residents. Not just the ability to handle crisis alone, but the wisdom to build networks of mutual support that can be activated when needed. The external assistance allowed Ashley and other local leaders to take brief breaks from their intensive work schedules. For the first time in weeks, Ashley was able to return to her apartment and sleep in her own bed for a full night. The break gave her perspective on how much the winter crisis had demanded of everyone involved. Unlike the earthquake, which had required intense effort for a few days, this crisis was testing the community's ability to maintain caring, organized responses over an extended period. "I'm learning new things about leadership and community resilience," she wrote in the journal she had started keeping during the winter crisis. "The earthquake taught us about dramatic response to acute crisis. This winter is teaching us about sustained care and mutual support during chronic difficulties." One of the most important lessons Ashley learned during the winter crisis was the importance of maintaining normal community activities and traditions, even during difficult times. She had initially thought that all non-essential activities should be suspended to focus resources on emergency response. But she discovered that maintaining some normalcy was crucial for psychological and social well-being. When several community members suggested canceling the annual winter festival due to the crisis, Ashley initially agreed. But Mrs. Thompson and other longtime residents convinced her that the festival was especially important during difficult times. "People need something to look forward to," Mrs. Thompson argued, "and they need reminders that this crisis won't last forever, that normal life will return." The modified winter festival, held at the warming centers with local musicians and simple decorations made from available materials, became one of the most meaningful community events in Riverside's history. Children who had been cooped up indoors for weeks were able to play games and participate in activities. Adults who had been focused on survival and emergency response were able to relax and enjoy each other's company. "This is beautiful," Sarah Williams commented as she watched Jamie and David leading a group of younger children in winter-themed games. "Even in the middle of all these difficulties, we can still create joy and connection." The festival also served as an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the many contributions people had made during the crisis. Ashley organized a brief ceremony to acknowledge volunteers, donors, and community members who had gone above and beyond in helping their neighbors. But the most moving moment of the festival came when elderly Mr. Henderson, whom Ashley had rescued from the senior center fire years earlier, stood up to speak to the gathered community. "I want to say something about Ashley Martinez," he began, his voice shaky but determined. "6 years ago, she saved my life when the senior center caught fire. But that's not why I'm speaking today." He paused, looking around at the faces of his neighbors in the crowded warming center. "What I want to say is that Ashley has taught all of us how to save each other. The way we've taken care of each other during this winter crisis. That's Ashley's real gift to this community. She's shown us that we don't have to wait for heroes to rescue us. We can be heroes for each other." The applause that followed Mr. Henderson's words was long and heartfelt. Ashley felt tears in her eyes as she looked around at the community that had grown so much in strength and compassion since the earthquake. As winter slowly gave way to spring, the immediate crisis began to ease. Power was restored to most areas of town, heating systems were repaired, and the heavy snows finally melted. But the experience had left lasting impacts on both Ashley and her community. "We're different now than we were before the winter," Ashley observed to Dr. Moore as they walked through downtown Riverside, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom around the rebuilt structures. "The earthquake taught us that we could respond to sudden crisis. This winter taught us that we can sustain each other through prolonged difficulties. The lessons of the winter crisis influenced Ashley's approach to her various roles and responsibilities. She began incorporating more content about long-term resilience and chronic stress management into her disaster preparedness training programs. Her wellness center added programs focused on seasonal depression and other mental health challenges that were common during difficult periods. She also became more intentional about building sustainable practices into all of her work. The winter crisis had reminded her that effective community service requires not just the ability to respond intensively to immediate needs, but also the capacity to provide consistent support over long periods of time. "I'm 51 years old now," Ashley reflected during a quiet moment in her salon, cutting the hair of one of her long-term clients. "I've learned that I can't sprint through my entire career. I need to find ways to pace myself so that I can continue serving my community for many years to come." This realization led Ashley to make some significant changes in her professional commitments. She reduced her travel for speaking engagements and consulting work, focusing more of her energy on local programs and regional initiatives that didn't require extensive time away from Riverside. She also began training other community members to take on leadership roles in emergency response and community resilience programs. Rather than being the sole coordinator of crisis response efforts, she worked to develop distributed leadership that could function effectively even if she wasn't available. "The goal is to make myself unnecessary," she explained to Maria Santos, who had become one of her key collaborators in veteran support programs. "A truly resilient community doesn't depend on any one person, no matter how skilled or dedicated they might be." This philosophy guided Ashley's work with the next generation of community leaders. Jamie Williams and David Thompson had both expressed interest in careers that would allow them to serve their community, and Ashley began mentoring them more formally in leadership skills and community development. "Leadership isn't about being the person with all the answers," she told them during one of their regular mentoring sessions. "It's about bringing people together, helping them discover their own strengths, and creating systems that allow everyone to contribute to the common good." Jamie, now 15 and president of his high school's community service club, was particularly interested in the intersection of social work and emergency management. "I want to help people the way you helped us after the earthquake," he told Ashley. "But I also want to work on preventing crises and building stronger communities before disasters happen." David, whose analytical skills had proven so valuable during the winter crisis, was drawn to the technical aspects of emergency preparedness and infrastructure resilience. "I like figuring out how systems work and how to make them better," he explained. "I want to study engineering so I can design buildings and utilities that can handle earthquakes and storms without failing." Ashley was pleased to see how both young men were building on their experiences with crisis and recovery to develop career goals that would benefit their community. They represented the kind of long-term positive change that could emerge from difficult experiences when communities responded with wisdom and mutual support. 7 years after the earthquake, Ashley was invited to return to the military base where she had received her initial medical training to speak to a group of new nurses beginning their service. Standing in the same classroom where she had first learned about trauma care and emergency medicine, she reflected on the unexpected journey her career had taken. "When I left the military, I thought I was done with crisis response and emergency medicine," she told the young nurses. "I was burned out, traumatized, and convinced that I needed to find a completely different way to contribute to society." She paused, looking at the eager faces of the nursing students, so similar to her own face decades earlier when she had been full of idealism and determination to save the world. "What I learned is that you can't really escape who you are, but you can find new ways to express your core values and use your skills. I'm still a nurse, even though I spend much of my time cutting hair and running a beauty salon. I'm still serving my community and taking care of people who need help, just in a different context. Ashley shared stories from both her military service and her civilian disaster response work, emphasizing the importance of self-care, sustainable service, and community-based approaches to crisis management. The most important lesson I can share with you is this: effective service to others requires taking care of yourself. You can't help people if you're physically, emotionally, or spiritually depleted. Find ways to maintain your own health and well-being, build supportive relationships, and create meaning in your life beyond your professional duties. After her presentation, several of the nursing students approached Ashley with questions about career paths, trauma recovery, and community service. Their questions reminded her of her younger self, passionate about helping others, but not yet aware of the challenges and complexities that would come with a life dedicated to service. "How do you know when you're making a real difference?" asked one student. "Sometimes it feels like the problems are so big and there's so much suffering that individual efforts don't matter." Ashley smiled, remembering asking similar questions during her own military service. You make a difference one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. The earthquake in my town lasted only 2 minutes, but the recovery and rebuilding has taken years. Change is usually slow and requires patience, but it's real and it's cumulative. On the flight home from the military base, Ashley thought about the circular nature of her journey. She had started as a young nurse eager to save the world, burned out trying to do too much too fast, retreated to a quiet civilian life, and then discovered new ways to serve her community that were both effective and sustainable. Now she was sharing those lessons with a new generation of caregivers, hoping to help them avoid some of the mistakes she had made while encouraging them to find their own authentic ways of serving others. Returning to Riverside, Ashley found the town preparing for the 7th anniversary commemoration of the earthquake. The annual event had evolved over the years into both a memorial for those who had been lost and a celebration of the community's ongoing resilience and growth. This year's commemoration was especially significant because it marked the completion of a major community project that had been years in the planning. A new community resilience center that would serve as both a normal times gathering place and an emergency response headquarters during crisis. The building, designed with input from David Thompson and other young community members, incorporated lessons learned from both the earthquake and the winter crisis. It had backup power systems, flexible spaces that could be quickly converted for emergency use, and design features that made it accessible to people with various disabilities and mobility needs. This building represents everything we've learned about preparing for and responding to crisis, Ashley said during the dedication ceremony. But more importantly, it represents our commitment to taking care of each other, not just during emergencies, but every day. The Resilience Center included spaces for Ashley's wellness programs, meeting rooms for community organizations, a commercial kitchen for both normal events and emergency food preparation, and a communications center that could coordinate with regional emergency response agencies. It also included something that Ashley was particularly proud of: a memorial wall recognizing not just the victims of the earthquake, but also the many community members who had contributed to the recovery and ongoing resilience efforts. The wall featured quotes, photos, and stories that captured the spirit of mutual support and collective strength that had emerged from the town's experiences with crisis. Everyone who has contributed to making our community stronger deserves to be remembered, Ashley explained to the gathered crowd. Heroes come in many forms, some dramatic and visible, others quiet and steady. This wall honors all of them, As Ashley approached her 52nd birthday, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the direction her life had taken. The unexpected detours and challenges had led her to a form of service that felt authentic, sustainable, and deeply meaningful. She was helping individual people with their immediate needs, while also contributing to the long-term strength and resilience of her entire community. The various strands of her work had woven together into a coherent whole that drew on all aspects of her experience and abilities. Her military training informed her approach to crisis management and leadership development. Her medical knowledge enhanced her ability to provide health and wellness services. Her personal experience with trauma and recovery enabled her to help others navigate similar challenges. And her deep connections within the Riverside community gave her insights into local needs and resources that outside experts couldn't match. Looking ahead, Ashley saw many opportunities for continued growth and service. The model she had developed, combining beauty services with community wellness programs and emergency preparedness, was being replicated in other small towns. Her veteran support programs were expanding to serve broader regional populations. And the young leaders she had mentored were beginning to take on significant responsibilities in their own right. "I think I've finally figured out what sustainable heroism looks like," she wrote in her journal on her 52nd birthday. "It's not about dramatic rescues or perfect solutions to complex problems. It's about showing up consistently for your community, adapting to changing needs and circumstances, and helping others discover their own capacity for leadership and service." The hero's journey, she had learned, doesn't end with a single dramatic act of bravery. It continues every day, in every choice to help rather than ignore, to engage rather than withdraw, to use your abilities in service of something larger than yourself. And in that ongoing choice, Ashley had found not just her calling, but her home. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.